All right, good afternoon. I'll start with Libya. We can report that throughout the night, Tripoli witnessed the heaviest fighting since the outbreak of the clashes, with indiscriminate rocket fire on a high-density neighborhood in the Libyan capital. At least 5 civilians have been reportedly killed and several others injured. The Secretary General's special representative in Libya, Ghassan Salameh, condemned in the strongest terms the overnight shelling, recalling that responsibility for actions that may constitute war crimes now lies not only with the individuals who committed the indiscriminate attacks, but also potentially with those who ordered them. In a statement to the media yesterday, Mr. Salameh renewed his call for international unity to spare Libya from the devastating consequences of a civil war. In the past 24 hours, we've also seen the highest single-day increase in displacement, with more than 4,500 people displaced, and that's according to the International Organization for Migration. This brings the total number of people forced out of their homes to 25,000. Wherever access allows, humanitarian partners continue to respond to the rapidly increasing needs throughout the provision of humanitarian support. However, according to our humanitarian colleagues, yesterday's request for a temporary ceasefire to allow for the safe and voluntary exit of civilians from the conflict areas did not materialize. Civilians trapped in conflict areas are reportedly running low on basic food items, as well as fuel, and experiencing prolonged electricity and water cuts. The humanitarian community continues to call on all parties to meet their obligations under international humanitarian law and protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. Yesterday, the UN Refugee Agency and its partners relocated another 150 vulnerable refugees who were detained in the Abu Salim detention center close to the ongoing clashes to UNHCR's gathering and departure facility in the center of Tripoli. Efforts are underway to bring more vulnerable individuals to safety. And we have seen the reports of a ferry accident on Lake Kivu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Secretary General will be writing to President Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of the Congo to express his condolences to the families of the victims, as well as the people and the government of the country. The United Nations stands in solidarity with the government as it responds to this incident and is ready to help with the response as requested. Turning to Sudan and back here, the Joint Special Representative for the UN African Union mission in Darfur, Jeremiah Mamabolo, briefed the Security Council this morning on key developments on his mission following the April 12th removal of President Omar al-Bashir. He said that changes at the federal level have an obvious impact on Darfur, including protests and violent acts. He assured the Council that in the midst of all these developments, the UNAU mission has remained vigilant, maintaining a robust posture, particularly in the Jebel Mara area of its area of responsibility, where the peacekeeping mission has troops. Also briefing the Council was the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Ursula Mueller, who noted that well before the latest developments in Sudan, humanitarian needs in Darfur and other parts of the country were already growing due to the economic crisis. She said that the direct impact on humanitarian operations in the recent political events has so far been limited, and regular operations have continued. But she expressed concern about the protection of civilians, particularly in Darfur. And turning to the Horn of Africa, around 23.4 million people are currently food insecure in the Greater Horn, including 10.7 million people across Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Uganda's Karamoja region. That's according to the Food and Security Nutrition Working Group, which is a regional platform co-chaired by the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, otherwise known as IGAD, and the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization. At a press conference in Nairobi earlier today, the group said that although food insecure population is lower than numbers observed during the 2017 drought, there is a high risk of worsening situation due to the forecast rainfall deficits and a delay in the start of the March to May long rains. WFP says it is closely monitoring the conditions in case of a new regional drought and is coordinating with governments and humanitarian responders. The agency is ready to respond if needed, but would rely on increased donor support to do so. More information available online. And in Afghanistan, a new UN report has found that although there has been a reduction in the number of torture cases since 2016, there are still many detainees who continue to say they have been subject to ill treatment. The joint report by the UN mission in Afghanistan and the UN Human Rights Office found that nearly one-third of the more than 600 detainees who were interviewed provided credible and reliable accounts of having been tortured. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, said that while the government's policies to combat torture and ill treatment has led to some progress, they are far from sufficient. For his part, Tadamichi Yamamoto, the Secretary General's special representative in Afghanistan, said that respect for the rule of law and human rights is the best way to create the conditions for sustainable peace. And turning to Iran, following days of heavy rains and flash flooding that impacted large parts of Iran, 3 UN interagency missions visited Lorestan, Golestan, and Ilam provinces last week to assess the humanitarian impact. The missions reported extensive damages to crops, basic infrastructure, and people's livelihoods. A mission to Khuzestan is underway. The UN is mobilizing support in coordination with the international community. The UN has also provided emergency health supplies, emergency shelter kits, and household items. On the 10th of April, at the request of the Iranian Ministry of Health, the World Health Organization had airlifted essential medical supplies, including trauma supplies, cholera, and non-communicable disease kits. In Geneva, the International Labour Organization has called for action to better manage electronic waste, also known as e-waste, so it can be turned into a source of decent work. The organization says that while the world produces as much as 50 million tons of e-waste a year, however, only 20% is formally recycled, even though it is valued at $62 billion. E-waste is also becoming an increasingly important resource for informal workers who recover, repair, refurbish, reuse, repurpose, and recycle electrical and electronic equipment. The agency called for an increased promotion of management of e-waste, as well as infrastructure to manage in ways that create decent jobs. It also urged the protection of people working with this material, which is toxic, hazardous, and negatively impacts the environment. And the WHO, World Health Organization, today released new recommendation on ways that country can use digital health technology to improve people's essential health services. WHO's Director General, Dr. Tedros, said digital technologies are an essential tool to achieve universal health coverage, keep the world safe, and serve the vulnerable. The guidelines also stress that people must be assured that their own data is safe and that they are not being put at risk because they have accessed information on sensitive health topics such as sexual and reproductive health. And tomorrow, my guest will be Pramila Patten, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on sexual violence in conflict. Madam.
Thank you, Steph. When do you expect the Security Council to discuss the Secretary General's report on Cyprus, which he submitted yesterday?
Yes, I went to advance copies to council members yesterday. I think we'd have to look at the council calendar, but we hope they can discuss it as soon as possible.
This month?
I think that's a question for the presidency, but usually it's not long after it's been distributed. Masood.
Stefan, in Libya, it is being said that it has become a full-blown civil war. Is it that can be described full-blown civil war? And what is the situation now? Do you have any idea?
Well, Masood, with all due respect, I think I just started with a long description of what the situation is now in Tripoli, which includes the indiscriminate firing of heavy weapons, including rockets, into residential neighborhoods, which is, to state the obvious, completely unacceptable, puts civilians at risk.
So you're not saying it's a full-blown civil war?
That's not the terminology we're using, but I'm not really right now focused on terminology. We're focusing on trying to get those who are controlling the weapons to stop, so we can at least get a humanitarian pause. James.
Yeah, follow up on Cyprus. Cyprus, clearly, peace efforts were one of the things that disappointed the Secretary-General early on in his tenure. Mm-hmm. Does he now feel the time is ripe for a new effort to push for peace?
I would not describe that in the way you've described it, and I don't want to get ahead of the Security Council, which just received an advance copy of the report. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Stefan. I have two questions. The first one is about the poorest country in Arab world. It's about Yemen. Multiple cases of cholera had been reported. They say over 2,000 cases every day, 100,000 people are involved, and so on and so forth. Is it considered epidemics yet or not? Do we have the numbers? And what's being done by UN structures there to prevent?
I mean, we have the number.
disaster?
We've reported on the numbers almost 2 or 3 times a week from here. The UN is very, very focused on trying to get the cholera outbreak under control. It's not the first time that we've seen it in this current conflict. The ongoing fighting, the lack of progress on the political track is, of course, very much hampering our humanitarian efforts. Your next question.
And the next question is, again, about Libya. Ghassan Salameh was supposed to chair a national reconciliation conference this week, and he told actually that this attack was supposed to undermine it. But the conference still will take place. Do we have a time frame about that conference?
What Mr. Salameh said is that there's no way to hold the conference while the guns are being fired.
Thank you.
Evelyn, and then we'll come back to this
Thanks.
hemisphere.
Uganda has offered a safe haven for ex-President Bashir. Is that something the UN would get involved with?
No. Not that I'm aware, and I've just seen the press reports. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Steph. On Nicaragua, does the SG have a message or a call on the new rallies that are happening today against Daniel Ortega government, movement that is going forward despite of the fact that they were not given an official authorization to be able to conduct the rally, and that has increased the prospect for tensions and possibly new violence or a crackdown against this opposition movement. So I wonder if there's any message from the SG on that.
Look, it's very important as a matter of principle that people be allowed to exercise their rights to demonstrate freely and peacefully. The Secretary General has said in the past, and we continue to say, that we stand ready to support Nicaraguans in their effort to promote a peaceful and prosperous country where human rights and the rule of law are upheld. I think we've always called for an inclusive political dialogue in order to try to get out of this current state. Masood.
Thank you, sir. On the latest figures online available on Israeli incarceration of children is 219. Can you confirm that?
Not at the top of my head, but I can try to get numbers from you.
Okay.
Monica, your time has come.